All right, just went ahead and started the recording. Welcome to the coaches conference call. Glad you guys can join us. We've got a lot of tournaments coming up, either this coming week. Ours here in Northern California is on Thursday. I know Florida, actually Southern California is on Monday, and then Florida and Southern Adventist University is coming up in just about 2.5 weeks or so. So it's all coming up in the next little bit. So really excited. It's kind of a fun season. Got a lot of excited, anxious kids here getting ready to go. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them as we go through. I'll just cover a few things as we get going. Just a review of kind of what to expect to the tournament day, how things are going there, and we'll just kind of work through as we get that going. So like I say, if you have questions, feel free to pop into the chat and ask questions as we get going through here. So let's see here. All right. All right. So all right, I'm going to share my screen. Just a second to pop this up. So we're going to jump in here. This is the hydrodynamics challenge guide, and want to point out a few things to you as we go through this. First of all is the core values poster. This is something that was kind of an auxiliary thing initially for the last several years, but now is being included in the challenge guide. And I have found it very useful for my kids as they're processing what the core values are. It also helps as they are working with the referees, I'm sorry, not the referees, but the judges, and working in that. So give me just a sec here. Let's see, all right, with that. So, and I'm gonna go ahead and keep everybody muted on here, just as you know. If you need to unmute yourself, do that. If you're calling in on a phone, *6 will unmute if you need to ask a question, or you can type it in the chat box if you're online on a computer. So the core values poster is very useful, and it's something that is expected now. There are different sections to it, and the guide here kind of walks through what they need to do it. I know some of the questions I get from my kids is, well, I'm not sure what to put in this area. Well, this isn't necessarily something that the judges aren't going to be taking it and looking at the requirements and checking off any checklist to see whether or not they did every single part of a core values poster. Really the purpose of the core values poster is, one is it's a communication tool to the judges to help the students communicate the core values, but it also really helps the students and the team members process what the core values mean, and help them think that through as they're working with it. So I found it very, very useful for my kids as they've been going through it and working with them to develop it. So it's nothing super complicated. I actually, of course, at this point it might be a little late to get it in because it takes shipping. The cheapest place I found it for poster boards is actually from Dollar Tree, of all places. It took about 2 weeks to get them in, but they were really cheap. Every place else are a little bit more expensive. Of course, if you're just buying 1 or 2, it's not that bad. But if you buy a couple dozen of them, I think 30 of them were like maybe $30 or $40 for 30 poster boards. So great price, good reference to keep in mind if you're looking maybe not this year or future years, if you're working in a classroom to work with that. So really very, very useful, but in working with that. The project, of course, when they go in to the judges, they're going to have 3 different judges. They're going to have the core values judge. They're going to have 10 minutes with them. They'll have 10 minutes with the project judge, 5 minutes to share with them. This statement right up here at the top is the key. Your team's project challenge this season is to improve ways people find, transport, use, or dispose of water. So everything has to do about it. Basically, there's 3 parts to the challenge. Every year it's the same. If you've done it before, you're familiar with this. If you haven't, you'll see the same pattern. This year is hydrodynamics. Next year is going to be into orbit. We're going to be dealing with space. Be kind of cool. But every year the project is pretty much the same. You identify a problem, you then design a solution, and then you share it with others. it is very, very, very important that your teams share it with others. The judges, and I have been instructing my teams, the judges will not be asking whether or not they've shared it with others. However, it is critical that they do share it with others. If they do not share it with others, they are not eligible for an award in the project category, nor are they eligible for the championship award or the champions award. They cannot advance. It is very, very important that they do that and that they communicate that with the judges. So more than anything else, make sure your teams know they need to share it. And of course, some are like, okay, who do we share it with? Well, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. One way that you can share it, well, I had a team member say, hey, my brother is an engineer. Can I FaceTime with him and share it? Well, yeah, sure, why not? I have a teacher I'm working with. She's got 4 teams in her classroom, and they were struggling with somebody to do that with, and she saw a SMUD truck pull up to our campus this morning. And it was a community relations guy for SMUD. SMUD is our power company here. And the power company truck pulled up, and he was here to talk to our plant services director about thermostats, automated thermostats and that kind of thing for our campus. And she's like, hey, I'm going to go talk to him. And so she went down and just asked him, hey, would you come up and listen to my kids? And he was like, yeah. And he probably spent half an hour or so, half an hour, 45 minutes listening to the kids. So there's a lot of creative ways you can do it. They can share very locally, just with parents, but obviously that's something the judges are going to look at, is how they shared that information. How they did their research, how they came up with it is very important as well. So the rubrics, and we can talk about that as well. We've talked about that in previous coaches conference calls. Rubrics are public, they're available. I print them out and give them to the team members so they know what they're being evaluated on, so they can make sure they hit those points in what they do. So that's the project essentially, those 3 parts to it, a lot of research information available into there. When it comes to the actual missions, some things to keep in mind, and these are things that I remind, some things are kind of obvious, simple, but some things that are some little nuances. Here, Rule R14 is an important one for interrupting. So as you know, the robot has to start completely in base, then it can go out and do its missions, and it can come back. Well, what happens if they touch the robot when it's not in base? Well, first of all, they are not to touch anything outside of base, pretty much. So if they touch the robot when it's not completely in base, here's the rules as far as what happens, and this is very important that they understand. If the robot's completely in base, they can relaunch it, and they start it over again, and not a problem, no penalty. If it's not completely in base, which means any part of it is outside of base or it's completely outside of base, they relaunch it and there's a penalty assessed. Not too big of a deal. Sometimes the robot goes off crazy. Hey, that happens, not a problem. But there's just a penalty. And sometimes you take the penalty and you move on. But what about the things that it's transporting? Well, if the thing that's transporting is completely in base, they keep it and they reuse it. However, if what they're transporting is not completely in base, they give it to the ref. So if they are transporting out, let's say they're transporting the well out to where it needs to go to its target, and the robot goes crazy and they have to pick up the robot while it's carrying that, the ref takes that and keeps it. And then they no longer have that model. So that's very important to know of where that's at. So now if the robot goes crazy and drops the well on the way out there, and it's no longer carrying or transporting that, they pick up the robot and the well stays where it's at. They cannot retrieve that well and bring it back and reuse that. So an important distinction there as you're going through, just be aware of that when it's up there. So stranding is another thing there. If the robot loses something it was transporting, it must become to rest. Once it does, here's what happens. This is what it's talking about there. If it's partly in base on the line, they give it to the ref. If it's completely outside of base, they leave it where it's at. If it's in base, they can of course work that again. So important things there. I believe, let me just double check the rule. If the part of the robot comes off, I believe they can grab that and bring it back in. They can retrieve a part of the robot, but that's different than if it's an actual mission, if it's an actual model that they're transporting. If you're not sure on any rules or on how something works, make sure you should have a practice round at the competition tables where you can go through and actually get scored and work with the refs during that practice round time. That's the time that you should ask any questions or get any clarifications of how it should work, because then you can adjust as you go forward. So the refs are the final authority there. If the ref you're working with doesn't know, he'll ask the head ref, who will make a call and a ruling on it based on the rules. So let's see. Yeah, so here you may pick up any equipment that it broke off the robot unintentionally anywhere at any time. So so if something comes off of your robot, you can pick it up. But if it's a mission model that's being transported, then that's where the other rules come into place there. The other thing to remember is while your whole team goes up to the competition field at the robot performance rounds, only 2 team members, or technicians they're called, are allowed at the competition field at once. They can trade off if they need to, but only 2 people can be there. Everybody else will stand back out of the way. All right, so that kind of covers some of the key things there. The other thing that I wanted to highlight today is the robot design executive summary. Once again, this was kind of an optional auxiliary thing in the past, but this is now part of it. This is not meant to be an essay. It can be bulleted points. The goal of this, in my opinion, and the way I view it and to communicate it to the judges, is this is a tool that you can use to tell the judges how amazing and awesome your robot is. It just is a communication tool. It doesn't replace the talking and the communication they do, but it helps the kids really kind of organize their thoughts and think through why they did what they did and help communicate effectively to them. More than what's communicated and what's written there, it's a process for helping them organize and communicate that. Clearly, they shouldn't have typos and glaring errors, and it should be formatted nicely, but it's not meant to be an essay. They don't have to worry about big, fancy, flowing sentences, and it's not an English assignment. It is a robot design executive summary that kind of just outlines that. If there's part of it, here again, the judges aren't going to be looking at that and saying, oh, this little piece is missing. Oops, you got it wrong. They're not really going to do that. They're just going to use that as a tool for them for communicating and remembering what your team is about and what your robot's about. So a great tool, not meant to be super complex or complicated, but kind of gives you the sections that you have there. So typically in the morning, you're going to have your judging sessions. You have a practice round. Then in the afternoon, you'll have 3 competition rounds for the robot itself, and you get the best score out of the 3. Remember that the points are not really what matters. So to receive the Champions Award, which is the top award for the tournament, you need to be in the top 40% of teams at the tournament, but you don't have to be the top scoring team. You need to do well, but you don't have to be the best. What really matters is what goes on in those 3 judging sessions. That's very, very important for these teams, and really what matters there. So work with them on their presentations and how they present and what they do, and help them to be effective at what they're doing there. So that's kind of an outline, an overview at this point in the season of what you're doing. I know I've said this before and I'll say it again. Many, many teams come to me over the years, and the coaches say, oh, I'm just not ready. This is my first year and I don't feel like I'm ready. And I often I'll say over and over, you're never ready. And I can tell you, we have a high school robotics team and we did really well this year. we made it to the championship, and we actually got an award of the championship. And every year, I will tell you, every single year, whether it's FLL, First Lego League, First Tech Challenge, the high school team, as a coach, as a mentor, I am always learning. There's always things I figure out every year. And we did well. We came back, and the next day we sat down and we said, hey, so what could we do better next time? How can we improve? How can we get better? So it's always that kind of reflection after the tournament. Make sure you have time with your team. Celebrate your success. Celebrate what you've done, no matter what you've done. And I tell my kids, I'm not, and we're doing it part of classes here. And so, you know, one of the questions I get is, well, what's my grade going to be? What do I need to do to get an A? And it's like, hey, my expectation for you is that you do your best and that you really learn and grow from this. And it's not one of those things that you can say, oh, yeah, an A is this many points on the field, because it's much more than that. It's much more of there's a lot of intangibles in this, much more subjective grading when it comes in the expectations. So take time afterwards, celebrate those successes. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. Talk about, you know, what worked well, what would you do differently next time? And we, in our robotics team, one of the things that we talk about a lot is the phrase we use is it's opportunities for growth. They're not things we did wrong; they're opportunities for growth. And you know, help your kids understand that and view that yeah, when things don't go right, it's not bad. It's a learning experience and it's an opportunity for growth. So encourage them with that. Celebrate that success. You know, talk about, yeah, how do we grow, and admit that as a coach, I'm learning, I'm growing. We're all working together here as we come through. So do that, communicate with them, and celebrate the success after your tournaments, and just, you know, enjoy the time, have fun. Remember, one of the core values is you have fun. So go into it. Clearly, you want to do well. You want to succeed. You want all those great awards, but ultimately, you just want to learn, because what we learn is more important than what we win. What we discover is more important than what we win. So emphasize that, encourage that with them, and you'll have a great day. So let me pull up, just switch here just a little bit. All right, so so what degree of sharing is there? So as I talked about, certainly it's a little bit of a panic. The important part is that you share. The disqualification is that you don't share. So let me pull up, let me grab here, hold on just a second. Let me switch here just a little bit. Pull up a file here, the rubric itself. Google Drive. Okay. Let me see if this will pull up. So here, let me share this back out with you. So this is the rubric here for the project. Let me zoom in here. So research, innovative solution, and then sharing. So what we're looking at here is this is the rubric that they're going to do. So what you don't want is this ND. ND means not demonstrated. So you don't want them to be there. If they're there, then that's a disqualification. So the right here is where you don't want to have that circled on there. So make sure you communicate it. Can you share it with family and friends? Yes, you can. That's the minimum requirement. Sharing outside family and friends, such as classmates. Shared with one or more audience who may benefit, or one professional, or multiple professionals. So the more you share, the better you are. Any one of these in here doesn't disqualify you. Clearly, the more you do, the better you are. The biggest thing I want to make sure you know is make sure that you have shared it somewhere so you don't get the ND. You can share it with friends and family. There's simple ways to do that. But this is the rubric that the judges are going to use. So you want to communicate who you've shared it with and how you've shared that in different ways. And ideally, it's not just sending an email to sharing it, but it's actually physically, personally interacting with them in that way. So emails really wouldn't impress a judge, I don't think. But so you can do it pretty simply. Like I said, hey, there's creative ways. Somebody walking by, professional, hey, can you come on in? Who do you know in your community that you can share it with? Maybe it's a board chairman at your school, or you know, a pastor, somebody outside. Obviously, if you have somebody in your community who's an engineer, you know, saying and asking the kids, hey, give me feedback on this presentation. What would you suggest that we change or adjust? And you know, they may have some suggestions, and some of these ideas may not all stand on all four legs, so to speak, and that's okay. But they can still, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? You'd be surprised in the adults that might be willing to do that, and it doesn't take a lot of effort, and it doesn't take a lot of time to be able to share it that way. So the rubrics that you have, very important. Go through those. They're available. You should be able to Google First Lego League rubrics and come up with them. I know they're using the same rubrics every year as they do that. So the only thing this year that's changed, the project rubric has changed. A little more emphasis on research and that kind of thing as it goes through in the evaluative process. So what about sharing with students or classmates? That definitely works in the whole class. That is sharing it. Ideally, you want that, but that's going to be at the lower end of that rubric as it goes through. So yeah, if only a handful of students on the class are it and they share it with the rest of the class, yeah, that's definitely sharing. But once again, that's in the lower end. As you're going out to, when you think about people who would benefit, I would interpret that as somebody at ADRA, or somebody with, you know, somebody who works, let's say if it was a third world country kind of project, something in Africa, to share it with somebody at ADRA, or sharing it with, you know, somebody in the water district, local water district, or something like that, you know, a professional in that area who might benefit from it. So now, but here again, it could depend on the project you do. Who would benefit from it might depend on that there. So, okay, so how to keep their age hydrated? Yeah. So who benefits from it depends on the type of project you have and the focus of your project. So once again, it's going to be up to your team to convince the judges that you have shared it with people that would benefit from it and how they benefited from that. So a lot of this is going to come down to how they communicate that to the judges and how they do that. So that would be one way. Once again, at the high end of the rubric, you're sharing it with multiple groups of people, not just one person, but finding different ways to do that. So encourage them to find different directions as they go through and different ways of doing that. So yeah, so, you know, shared with multiple audiences who may benefit, or multiple professionals is the high end of that rubric. So it's just an important part, and it really helps. And as you go through this, if you're working in this in a school environment, you know, how you be thinking about, you know, how do you support in future years? How do you structure some of your other lessons and some of the things that you do and the activities you do that help support them in what they're doing, and how to give good presentations and all that kind of thing as they go through. It's a great experience for them as they're going through this, because they're learning real life skills in presenting to judges when they're nervous. And of course, when they do the judging, when they go before the judges, just one other thing to keep in mind there, typically it's up to the tournament director but typically only one adult is allowed in the room. Some tournaments allow no adults in the room. At the tournaments I work with, I typically allow one adult because I want you to see what's going on and you to grow through the process. But I know a lot of FLL tournaments sometimes don't allow any adults in the room, and it's not that it's secret, but sometimes when an adult they know is in the room, their behavior changes and they kind of adjust from that. But that being said, when you go into that room, for example, if it's a project, as the adult in the room, you are not allowed to help them set up the project. You are only there as a silent observer. They have to go in and set everything up and do everything. You're not allowed to touch or do anything. You just walk in and you sit behind them. They can't look to you for cues. They can't be involved. Any interaction that you give them could be interpreted as a cause for disqualification for awards in that area. So you should have a coaches meeting in the morning. That you'll have with the tournament director and often the head referee or judge advisor, depending on who's there, and they'll kind of go over those ground rules and let you know. And if you're not sure, make sure you ask them what that would be. So, all right, any other questions as we go through? We've got some great questions. Thank you for asking. These are important things, and if it's your first tournament, it's always a nervous thing. Like I say, you're never completely ready. So feel you're there. So yes, if you have college students, they would be assumed as adults in the room. So only one non-team member probably would be the better way to put it, going into the room with them as an adult observer. Some, they may allow you to video record it if you want, but once again, it's not about, that would just be for your own reference. Kids can get nervous when a camera comes out, and sometimes the judges do. So be cognizant of that. They sometimes the judges get a little nervous if they feel like they're being recorded. You're not worrying about what the judges say. You're more concerned about how the kids are interacting for that. But it's more than just for your observation. Just to be able to observe, so when you come back and work with the kids next time, you can grow. It's more for you growing as a coach than it is really anything else. It's for your benefit as a coach to help you become a better coach as you're going through there. So, all right, any other questions? Just a minute here. Hopefully you've had a good season. If there's anything, we're working on these conference calls. We've done a number of them this year, working on future years and getting them more regular, getting them coming. Sometimes I had them scheduled, had to reschedule. We actually had a FTC championship tournament scheduled on the day that we had originally scheduled one of these conference calls for, and that wasn't going to work because it was an all-day. It was a big all-day tournament. We left at 5:30 in the morning and got back at 11 o'clock at night. So that was a big day. Had a great time. The kids learned a lot, did a lot. So if you have a K-12 school, if you're involved in a school that goes through the high school, I do encourage you to consider the First Tech Challenge. It's a lot of fun. We're having our first tournament on April 12 and 13 here in Sacramento for the Adventist Robotics League and First Tech Challenge, and we're super excited to get this going. In addition to that, just a couple little bugs in your ear. We hope to see you folks if you're involved in schools or if you have teachers involved, you're a community coach and you have teachers going to the Chicago the Teachers Convention this summer. We will be there in the exhibit hall. We're bringing our First Tech Challenge teams. We're going to have several high school teams as well as some First LEGO League teams demonstrating there. So it'd be a great opportunity to stop by and see us, say hello as you're doing that. I'd love to see you guys there as we're doing that. And please tell other people about it. We love spreading the love and to get more teams involved. We just see a huge impact that this has over and over on kids as they're involved in it. So the other one to take a look at, to consider, is First LEGO League Junior. That is for kind of grades 1 through 4. So it's compared to First LEGO League, it's really fun and easy. Not super big learning curve, The programming is very easy to do, and it's a lot of fun. So I encourage you to do that. So how many students got some more questions here? How many students can present the project and what is involved in setup? So when you present them, your entire team should be involved in all of your presentations. And your entire team goes to all the judging presentations. You should never leave anybody out. Everybody goes, is involved there. You don't want to just send one or two people. You want everybody going to those presentations. So what is involved in setup? That really depends on what you want to do in your presentation. Some kids come in with props. They may do a skit. It's really up to them and what they do. But keep in mind, keep any setup pretty minimal, because you have 10 minutes with the judges, and that includes your setup time. So you need to have everything walk in, set it up instantly, be ready to go. They need to be rehearsed for that. So if you're spending 2 or 3 minutes setting up, that's not going to work well for you, because that's going to really cut into the time that you have to share and impress with your judges. So have it all ready to go. Have them walk in, set it down, boom, be ready to go in whatever you do. So streamline that process. You should always be at your judging sessions 5 minutes ahead of time, waiting outside the door, so as soon as you're given the cue, you're ready to go. Often your judging sessions will be back to back with just a 5-minute break in between. So you'll do one judging session, come out, go to the next room, which will be right nearby, jump right in and do the next session. So be ready for that. The core values board, it's used as a talking point, so take it in with you. It's a great way for the kids to refer to things and what they've done as they're discussing, and it really helps them. So it should be taken to the judging presentation when they go to the core values judging presentation. For the first LEGO League, do we need to take a table to Southern? No, you do not. For all first LEGO Leagues, they should provide that. I know some teams do take things with them. Keep in mind that all tournaments provide practice tables. Those practice tables are officially set up, and the referees make sure they're right. What you do may or may not be right. You know, the walls are there. Everything's there the way it needs to be. So let's see here. Where can I get the information on what happens in the judging session? So what happens in the judging sessions is pretty much the same from tournament to tournament. So if you're not sure on that, you would need to talk to Tyson at Southern. Tyson Hall is the director of that tournament. If you have specific questions about that one, or talk to the tournament director. But pretty much the training the judges go through is the same no matter what tournament you go to. It all comes from first. They're to be the same pretty much as they go through. So we try to keep that as uniform. We really work to keep it uniform from tournament to tournament. We can't always 100% guarantee that, but we do our best to work with that. And they really work with us to make sure they're following the global standards and that things stay the same. So clarifying for the judges and the project judges, yes, you have a total of 10 minutes, so expect about a 5-minute presentation with 5 minutes for follow-up questions. So that does not include 5 minutes setup time. You're not going to have 5 minutes to set up. So really, you have 10 minutes, you have a 5-minute presentation, and then you want to have 5 minutes for follow-up questions for the judges, because often the judges may want a clarification because they've got their rubrics, they want to fill it out. So if something wasn't really clear about it, or they need clarification to know how to fill out one of the areas, they're going to ask some follow-up questions and maybe probing to see how they did and why they came up with what they did, and just some different kinds of probing questions there as they go through that. So yeah, you don't want your setup time to take any time really at all. And the day is very tightly packed. So you go from session to session to session, and if one is off, is I've in a lot of these, if everybody's off by 2 minutes, suddenly the day just took an extra hour or more in the length of the day. So keeping it on schedule is super critical to having everything end on time, and they will be there watching the time and cutting things off. And usually there's a timer outside the room that comes in and gives them a 2-minute warning and then tells them your time's up, to help keep everything on track. So, and you're within that. So if you take a lot of time setting up, that time starts, and at the end of your 10 minutes, you're still going to be done and be finished, and you won't have as much time to communicate with the judges. Your team won't have as much time. All right, great questions. Thank you so much. This all helps in the clarification. Glad to work this through and help you as you're working with it. Like I say, I hope you're have a successful time and a successful tournament. We want the kids to have a good, positive experience. Remember, the judges are there not to catch the kids in something, but to really help draw them out and help them be successful and enjoy the experience. So, and the judging sessions are private rooms in the sense that they're not presenting before an audience. They're really just presenting to that. As far as what time does the day start, typically plan on the day starting around 8 o'clock in the morning. You should get a schedule ahead of time from your tournament director. So I know I sent out very detailed schedules to all of my teams already. Of course, our tournament's just in 2 days here. But you should get that from them. You need to speak directly to your tournament director about with questions of when it starts. They'll be able to get that to you. But typically plan on usually 8 or 8:30 in the morning is when things starting. One of the very first things will be a coaches meeting where they'll meet with all the coaches and just clarify some of the process for the day as it goes through. So, all right, thank you so much. If you have other questions, feel free to start. Feel free to email me. Just one other question coming in here from Terry. If the presentation goes past 5 minutes or they stopped at the 5-minute mark, typically they wouldn't be. However, they may get cut off if because the judges want to be able to ask questions, so they may jump in and ask some questions. Typically they're respectful of that time, but if it goes very much over, they may do that, and they're not going to sit there with an exact timer and say, "Oop, you went 1 second over." So it's not that kind of a timing, but keep in mind that you want to give those judges time to be able to ask those follow-up questions and get the information they need and feel like they have the chance to dialogue with the kids and interact with the kids in the process as well. So advice for teams going the first time: enjoy the day. Realize that it's your first time and you're going to do a lot of learning. I can tell you about the tournament all day long, but until you have gone and experienced the tournament, there's only so much that you're going to be able to learn, to be able to understand from what I've done. It's a learning experience. Everybody has a rookie year, and this will be your rookie year. You're going to learn as a coach. Your team members are going to learn. So have them enjoy that. There are First Lego League Junior does not have tournaments. They have expos. They don't have judges. They have reviewers. So it's a very small thing. If you're interested in that, contact me. We can work. It's a much more smaller local thing. So if you have, we did it in our school here, and we had, I think, 7 teams that we had, and we just did it in an evening. It's about maybe an hour and a half, probably about a 2-hour program, something like that. We did in the evening after school, had some refreshments, and the kids had a good time, had some activities for the kids, and the kids talked to the reviewers, and the reviewers gave them awards based on what their team did. So it's a much lower pressure one, and we can work on you and helping recruit some teams locally, and we can help you put on. It's a very simple thing. Compared to First Lego League, it's a very simple thing to put together, and it's a fun little thing you can do in your community. So a lot of fun there. Be glad to support you. So if you're interested in that, shoot me an email. I'd love to dialogue with you some more. So, all right, with that, we're going to go ahead and cut it off here. Thank you so much once again for the time and the dedication that you've put into this. I know personally the amount of work it takes. So thank you so much, and you are making a difference in the lives of these kids, and you're impacting your schools as well, and helping raise the bar and really providing some really unique STEM education experiences for these kids that does pay off for them in the long run. Not only not only in future STEM careers, but in their self-confidence and their ability to communicate and to turn into positive adults. So thank you so much for what you do. You are making a difference. And sometimes it's, it's hard to see the forest for the trees, but remember, it's a really positive experience, and just have a good time with your kids as you go in. And remember, it's not what we discover is more important than what we win. So just keep that attitude with them, model that attitude for them, and you'll have a great time at your tournament. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.